Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome into the podcast. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about, is it okay for a head of household to decide not to punish his taken in hand?
But before we get to that, we'd ask you to hit that like button and, of course, hit the subscribe button because when you do, it makes me smile.
And if you want to support what we're doing and get the podcast in video form, get bonus content, all the things, support the channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. So a link to our Patreon is down below.
So it's been a while since we have actually done a podcast together.
It has. We pre-recorded a bunch of podcasts, so you guys have not noticed a lapse in podcasts coming out, but we pre-recorded a bunch to get ahead, and then we took the week of our boot camp off. We did record the videos about our boot camp right after, but then I got sick. Coda got sick, so it's been a while. I think that those boot camp videos have been the last ones that we recorded, and it's been a good 3, maybe even 4 weeks since we've sat down and recorded. So
kind of glad that we thought ahead with that. So it's good to finally be back. And this is an interesting topic for us being back.
It is. This topic kind of was inspired by a comment that I got on YouTube where somebody was saying that it's okay for a head of household to decide not to punish his taken in hand, and the taken in hand just needs to submit to the decision of the head of household. And while I would say that that's generally true, that as the taken in hand, it is my job to submit to the decision of my head of household, that video really wasn't about submission and about the struggle of submitting to a decision when you don't necessarily agree with it. I've done videos like that over on Patreon a lot, but that's not what this video is about. This video is more about when a head of household makes a commitment to hold a standard and then fails to hold that standard, and kind of what that does to a taken in hand, what that does to the relationship. And so I wanted to talk through, like, if a head of household sets a standard, assigns a consequence to that standard, and then decides not to uphold the consequence, is that okay?
Well, from experience, I can speak, obviously. And the short answer is this is not a good idea to not uphold the standard. When you do that, one of the things that is negative that definitely comes out of that is I think it really, first of all, made you really doubt, number one, my leadership. And number two, it made you lose a little bit of trust and maybe even a little bit of respect for me because I wasn't following through. And was it also, I think the other question that I would pose to you is, did you somewhat think, well, he's not taking this seriously?
All of those things, to be honest. This relationship requires so much vulnerability and so much trust. And as a taken in hand, my job is to lean onto my head of household. So when you don't uphold the rules, especially after you set a rule, you set a standard, you say, yes, this is important to me, and then you choose not to actually follow through with upholding that and holding me accountable to that. You decide not to punish me when I very clearly violated the rule. I very clearly went against the standard, and you decide not to offer that accountability. It makes me view your leadership as weak, and it makes me view, it does make me lose trust, because how can I lean on you for your strength, for your leadership, for your guidance when it's weak, when it's crumbling under the pressure of actually holding accountability? It does make me lose respect, because if you don't respect yourself enough to require me to respect you, require me to respect your word, if you don't have the integrity to follow through and make your words matter, why should I? Why should I respect you in that scenario? And also, submission is not passive. It is a very active role to be a taken in hand. I have to actively submit to you. I have to follow the rules. I have to choose daily that I am going to hold the standards that you have set in high priority. So if I'm putting in that effort, I want that effort matched. And the effort that you have to put in as a head of household is to hold those standards and follow through with accountability.
I think the big thing takeaway here is that the first thing is, if you don't enforce those rules, eventually you go, well, why should I follow them? If he's not going to enforce them, even if head of households, you say, well, I've only done that twice. I've only decided not to punish her twice. It doesn't matter. One is too much. And again, I'm speaking from experience here, because when we first started in this, all it took was one time for then Ari to say, well, he's not serious about it. So again, why should I follow the rules? And so that's the first thing that obviously comes to mind is they're just going to have this mentality, and they should, of if they're not going to enforce it and take that seriously, then why should I take my role seriously? So that's when it first starts to unravel. And then the second thing that Aria brought up, which I think is absolutely true, is that then you lose something that you work really hard in this relationship, I think, to build, and that's that trust and respect for one another. And again, if you're not going to take something seriously, why should you be respected? Why should your leadership be? Why should you be looked at as someone who is a good leader and is going to follow through with the things that you say? And so now you can see how the thread starts to unravel, right? Just from making that one decision. So that's why it's so important that you follow through with this, even if you think it's just a minor infraction. Even the small things matter.
Think about it from a head of household perspective, because there are two sides to this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And as a head of household, you really do require your taken in hand to follow certain rules. You have an expectation of my behavior, of my demeanor, of my submission. You have all those expectations. If I was just not doing those things, you would become frustrated.
Absolutely.
Especially if I was habitually not doing those things.
That's true.
And so it is okay as a taken in hand to be frustrated when your head of household is not fulfilling their side of the relationship. Now, how you express that frustration obviously matters a whole lot.
Absolutely, because there are good and bad ways to let someone know that you're frustrated, right?
And we don't have the authority or the ability to hold our head of households accountable in the way that a head of household, even in the situation of having a taken in hand that is just not fulfilling their role, a head of household has to, and it's their role to step in and offer that accountability to see that growth. We don't have the ability to do that for our head of household. Like, I can't hold Coda accountable, but I can tell him and I can express to him, this is frustrating. This is making it hard for me to submit to you. This is making it hard for me to respect you. Because without respect, without trust, without vulnerability, without connection, and without communication, this relationship just can't work.
And I know what potentially is going to be kind of devil's advocate here is someone may say, well, it should matter necessarily what the head of household decides to do, good or bad. The taken in hand should be submissive either way. But you have to think about something. Would you follow a leader, or have you chosen not to follow a leader because of the same reasons? Because maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, again, that leader's not taking anything seriously, but they want to hold me accountable to certain rules, so why should I follow them? The same feeling that you have, head of households, when you maybe have experienced that same thing, that's what your taken in hand is experiencing. So remember, too, this also shows your weakness in leadership. If you want to be known as a strong leader, if you want to be seen as a strong leader, you can't go about this in a way where it just happens to be the way the wind blows. You need to be steady regardless of again, if you've had one of those times where maybe you decided to be a little bit more lenient and not follow through because you've had a rough day, you're tired, there's all kinds of these different reasons. No matter what, you've got to decide, no matter how small the infraction, no matter what's happened in the day, that you're going to be hold steady and fast. And if your relationship right now is unraveling in some way, maybe you need to look to see if you just didn't follow through even just one time.
And I would say, are there exceptions to be made?
Sure.
However, you need to make sure that there are exceptions
That's
and
so
you're not
true.
getting into a pattern of just not holding standards. I think that one of the things that Coda did in our early relationship, one of the pitfalls that he fell into, is that he would talk to me. And
It doesn't mean in the way she's saying,
obviously communication is
but
necessary.
yes.
But when I would do something that was clearly a violation of our rules, he would talk to me about it first. And I got into a really bad habit myself of justifying my behavior
Hmm.
and talking him out of punishing me. Now, that is a natural response, especially for a taken in hand that is just coming into this relationship dynamic. It's natural to want to talk your way out of punishment. Punishment's not fun. It's not something you want to have to go through. So it's natural to want to talk your way out of it. And I definitely would do that and I always had a good reason. I always had a good reason for what I did. And so when Koda would talk to me before he decided what to do about it, I would give him all my reasoning. I would plead my case. I would make him see how logical my thought process was, why I did what I did, and why it was a good idea, and why I shouldn't be held accountable for clearly violating the standards and rules of our relationship. That was a mistake. That was something that Coda really shouldn't. And I really think that, and you tell me if I'm right here, but I feel like that came from you wanting to get validation from me that I not only understood what I did, but I agreed with being punished.
Yes, I think it started out that way, and then eventually it was, oh, well, she's got good reasons for doing the wrong thing. And I know that kind of sounds funny saying that out loud. Then why would you allow it to go on? But there's funny things that we tell ourselves, right, in order to say, well, I really don't need to do that. I mean, I don't want to be harsh, right? I want to be understanding. And there's all these excuses that we tell each other. And Arya will tell you she's very, very good, again, at being able to talk me out of a situation if I were to let her. And so I had to learn really, really quickly, you know what, if I ask, get an explanation from her each time, she is going to talk me out of it. And so we have to kind of put a lid on that. We can't allow that to happen.
And so, first, I want to say that if you are in the situation where you are feeling like you need to get confirmation of the consent of your taken in hand in the moment, you really do need to work through those feelings because
Hmm.
consent happens when you both agree to this relationship dynamic. And when I agreed to the rules were not imposed upon me, they were a negotiation. We came together. Coda told me what he wanted the rules and standards to be, and I had the ability to give my feedback and try to make some compromises if I felt like that was something that I needed in order to uphold these standards and follow these rules.
Hmm.
And so I had my time to say that, oh, I need accommodation here, or can we talk about this over here? I had that. I had that opportunity. I agreed to the rules. I gave consent that, yes, these rules are reasonable, they are practical, I can uphold them, there's no reason I can't. And I gave consent for the consequence. You don't need that in the moment confirmation.
Correct.
You just need to follow through and do what you said that you were going to do when you had that initial conversation.
Now, head of households, I don't want you to think that you can't ask your taken in hands for an explanation. But the thing that you don't want to do, and this is the trap that you fall into, is you may want to save that for post punishment. Maybe the lecture, but I still think the best the best time to bring that up or to ask, why did you do X, Y, and Z, is post punishment. Because again, then it's done. You have followed through with it. You have kind of put an exclamation point, if you will, to say, I followed through with the rules. You've been punished. You know it was wrong. You shouldn't do it again. But now I want to know, why did you? And that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because after you punish and you ask the question, why did you? Maybe you then can help your taken in hand to understand, okay, I know you did it for this reason, but here's why you shouldn't do that. Now that I understand the explanation, here's why you shouldn't do it again.
I completely agree with what Coda just said. You need to have those conversations after the punishment, because the reason is that the temptation to try to talk your way out of punishment is just really high.
It's really high.
And you don't want to give your taken in hand the opportunity to try to do that, because they most likely will, unless you've set very clear boundaries and very clear standards against doing that. But if you are falling into this temptation of changing your mind, most likely you have a taken in hand that's very good at trying to talk their way out of it. But also, you want to really make the lecture more about the head of household, telling the taken in hand, this is what you did. It violates our rules. It's unacceptable. I will not allow this behavior or this action. And you want to set it up that way so that the taken in hand does not have the opportunity to try to explain it away. And also, we were finding that a lot of frustration was building during that conversation.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we would get into arguments during that pre-spanking conversation, which is obviously
it's so true.
so detrimental to the process.
Yep.
And so now we have the expectation that you tell me exactly how it is. I am not to respond except with, yes, sir, or I understand. I just do not have the leeway to start a conversation during that pre-spanking lecture. And then afterwards, we can have the conversation. And also, my mindset is so much more submissive. It's so much more docile, to where things that were a big deal that I wanted to argue about, I wanted to explain away, I wanted to say all the things, all of a sudden they're not as important. And so really you weed through what really is the most important thing to communicate it after the punishment has been dealt with.
Now, part of that reason is that we've set it up to where she knows that if she tries to give an explanation during the lecture, it's just going to make the punishment worse. That I have the ability to say, it is not your time to talk. If you continue to try to explain your behavior away, the punishment is going to get worse. I'm going to up it, because this is not the time or place to do it. So that then after the punishment again, this gives you an opportunity to then let her have the explanation then. And what you'll find is, too, head of households, if you're doing it post punishment, she's not necessarily going to rationalize it as much. She understands now why it was wrong. She's gone through the whole punishment. And so more than rationalizing it, she's probably going to tell you, I realize how wrong that was. Here's why I initially did it, but I understand why that was wrong. And you may not have to, give the lesson per se. She may tell you, I realize why it was wrong, and this is why I'm not going to do it again, because regardless of what the intention was, I realized that was not the right thing to do.
And to a certain extent, that is very true. I will always apologize first. I will always admit where I was wrong. But sometimes I can see how it was wrong. I can see where it went against the standards. I do apologize. But sometimes it gives me the opportunity to say, I knew that this was wrong, but I didn't see an alternative. I didn't see a path to honoring the standard and being obedient. I need help here. I need to know what, given the specific circumstances that I was in, what would have prevented me from getting punished here? And then you can have those conversations, but it's not I didn't, it's not a rationalization.
It's not an opportunity for her at that point to try to talk you out of anything. And in fact, what you'll find, head of households, is that 9 times out of 10, because I know some of you have already thought, well, what she's going to do is just talk me out of it for next time. That
No.
that does not happen. At least not in our situation. And even that, if that is the case, the first thing you should ask yourself, and we don't need to go too far into this, is, well, maybe she didn't learn her lesson. And so that's an opportunity for you to give a warning to say, hey, if you're still justifying this, maybe we need to continue the punishment. And that's what you'll find, is that depending on which way she goes with it post punishment, you know whether or not the punishment was effective, or maybe you need to continue. Maybe the lesson wasn't learned.
The whenever we've had conversations pre-punishment, there's a certain attitude
Yes,
that
exactly.
accompanies that conversation, which is why it's not productive.
Yes.
After a punishment, you really should not see that attitude.
No.
If there is any type of conversation to be had, it should be very productive, and the taken in hand should be approaching that with submission and with a understanding of their role in the relationship, and an understanding of the authority of the head of household. If you don't see that, if you see an attitude, if you see they are trying to start an argument post punishment, that is your cue that you either need to do a full nother punishment, a correction, or you just need to continue the punishment the way you were doing it until they can have a productive conversation,
Hmm.
because it's not about breaking down the taken in hand until they, breaking them into submission,
No, that's not what this is about.
but it is about creating a situation where roles are intact
Hmm.
and proper respect is being displayed.
The most important thing to take from all of that is, so that the order stays intact and the learning happens, the mending of the relationship happens, and the lessons again are learned from the punishment situation. And remember, even you, head of households, learn each punishment you give to your taken in hand, because you can help then guide her post punishment on how to not have that punishment happen again. And so that's what that fosters.
So the only way that you get to all of these good outcomes when you do punishments and when you hold accountability is by doing the punishments and holding the accountability. And so, to bring it back to our original kind of topic here, if you say that you are going to set a standard, if you say that you are going to set a rule, if you assign a consequence to that standard and rule, you need to be very consistent with upholding that standard, with following through with those consequences, because if you don't, it will break down your relationship. And you need to show your taken in hand that your word matters,
Hmm.
that it means something, that you have the integrity as a leader of your home to hold accountability and to follow through with what you said you were going to do.
Great leaders, great head of households, they all hold to the standard that they have set. And I know all of you out there, especially head of households, you want to keep the relationship intact. You want the relationship to succeed. And so the simplest thing, it's not easy, but the simplest thing to do is just to remember, I'm going to follow through with what I said that I wanted her to reach, so that it doesn't unravel. Because as we said, this is the simplest but not easy thing to follow through with. Because if you don't follow through, the entire relationship, I think this is like the crux or the cornerstone of your entire relationship. If you don't do this, that is the reason potentially you're having trouble in your relationship and it's not working out. Because without that cornerstone of following through and holding to the rules, the whole thing falls apart. It just all crumbles.
All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this topic. I hope that you got something from it. We obviously had a lot of thoughts because it's something that we really struggled with for a long time.
Absolutely. And I struggled with in our relationship, very much so.
And it's something that we see being such a key to success. And this is something that can really make or break your relationship. So we wanted to talk about it because I think that too many times people just have this concept that, like, it's all up to the head of household, at their whim. And it's really, it is, but A head of household really does need to be careful to set his intentions, to say what he means what he says, and
Follow
to
through.
follow through with it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, head of households, go follow through with what you said.
All right, guys, we will talk to you next time.
See you later.